For those of you that are joining in, I want to welcome everybody to this week's Business Unusual. My co-host Peter Klein and I started this right when COVID lockdown started, and we felt like it would be a good resource to the business community to have a weekly show where we can track sort of what the progress has been on economic recovery, on the COVID crisis in general, and how it's impacting critical parts, not just of the economy, but of our society. And a lot of folks have reached out to us and have said that they want to understand more about how law enforcement is impacting. We see all of the protests and the riots and the calls to defund police departments across the country, and many folks are concerned that that's going to stall and even already lagging economic recovery. And we have no better person to talk about that and no greater resource here in Suffolk County than the District Attorney, Tim Sini. For those of you who don't know Tim, I've known him a long time. He was brought in initially as the Commissioner of the Suffolk County Police Department when that department was rocked by scandal, and he was able to go in and turn that department around and really bring some integrity back to the Suffolk County Police Department after that scandal. And then he was elected district attorney to yet have to bring integrity back to another department here that was rocked by scandal. And he's done a tremendous job. It's a relief when you don't see your district attorney in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. And we really appreciate that. Those of us who are lifelong Suffolk County residents, Tim, that have watched, these offices be politicized and used corruptly over the years, really appreciate the stability that you've been able to bring to Suffolk County and build, not just help build a world-renowned police department, but a world-renowned prosecutorial team now. I was talking to County Executive Steve Ballone, and I said the world has to realize we're not farm country anymore. We're actually a very sophisticated county with a lot of issues and some great people at the top. So we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Yeah, so we've been talking now. I can't believe we're going to be going into 6 months of lockdown at some point soon, which is incredible. And it's the parabola. We really went into free fall and panic March, April, sort of stabilized a little bit in May. June, July slogged through some mud, I think, and we're coming back up through it now. So talk about how that experience impacted you as the chief law enforcement officer here in the county in your office, right? So we go into March, and from a business guy, them saying we're shutting down the economy means one thing. For a top prosecutor, shutting down the economy must mean a whole host of other things. So what was your reaction over those 6 weeks, and how did you sort of manage through that crisis?
Yeah, so we were keeping an eye on this, and thanks to my team, we were prepared to shift to a virtual model to the extent possible. But I would say there's sort of two categories here. There's the office management side, and then there's the public safety issues that actually came about because of the pandemic or were related to the pandemic. In terms of office management, we aggressively got everyone home. We wanted our workforce to be safe. And we invested in technology over the last couple of years. We were able to shift to that virtual digital model very quickly. So by March 16th, essentially everyone was home working remotely. And of course, there are parts of our operation where people have to appear in person. But for the most part, we were working remotely. And we were the first court system in New York State to go completely digital, which we're very proud of. We worked in collaboration with the defense bar and the courts. Randy Hinrichs was the administrative judge at the time. He did a tremendous job leading the courts, really a leader in the state. And we were able to do digital court proceedings before many other counties in New York State. It was very interesting. We were appearing via Skype. We had all of the defendants appear in one location. They appeared via Skype. the defense counsel appeared via Skype, and the judge was via Skype, and you had the court reporter. It was fascinating. And so we tried to adapt as quickly as possible. And I think that was to our benefit. Our infection rate in the office is extremely low, and we were able to keep the trains going, which is very important. And then on the sort of back end, we were, I think, proactive in getting people back. So at this point, we are about 60% back in the office. We're all socially distanced. We're able to socially distance, and we have a lot of people working a hybrid model, which I think is actually a great model for worker productivity, frankly, and morale. We have a mask requirement. We got these nice new.
Oh, that's cool.
DA masks, so. And everyone has their New York State sanitizer on their desk, and we're taking a lot of precautions. And again, it's many people are still working hybrid, but fortunately, we already have our grand juries back. So one of the consequences of the pandemic was that we couldn't bring in grand juries beginning in March, right? And whenever you make an arrest on a felony charge, you have to indict. You have to present that case to a grand jury within a particular period of time. And then, of course, jury trials. We need trial jurors to hear our criminal trials. And so all of that stopped, and it was suspended. The requirements to present a case to the grand jury and to have a speedy trial were suspended by the governor via executive order because it was obviously impossible. But now we're already, we're not even out of August. We've already had a grand jury for a month. We have 2 grand juries actually in Suffolk County operating. And Joe, let me just say something about Suffolk County. Nothing made me more proud when we summoned grand jurors, and we had 10 contingency plans because we just assumed people wouldn't show up. People would easily be excused because of concerns about health, and people were just unbelievable in terms of their civic responsibility. We made sure they knew we were going to keep them safe. We got different rooms, so that big rooms so they can socially distance. We have all sorts of protocols, including temperature checks, and we gave them those assurances, and they stepped up and they're serving. And now, because the grand jury process went so well, we're going to be doing criminal trials, jury trials in September. And that's just fantastic for the people of Suffolk County and for the justice system.
Hey, Tim, forgive my naivete on these matters, but you'd earlier mentioned that there were some Zoom courts that you were doing. It sounded like a court proceeding via Zoom, but then you were saying that the jury, not juries, is that what it is? You can't do a jury by Zoom? Is that what it comes down to? Right.
So during the basically beginning in March, we quickly pivoted to a digital court model, and those were court proceedings like criminal arraignments, court conferences, certain types of hearings. So those are matters that were presided over by a judge, and everything dealing with a jury, whether it's a grand jury or a trial jury, was essentially suspended from around March 20th to mid-July. Starting in mid-July, we brought back 2 grand juries, and they've been operating. They operated their full term. We've convened another 2 grand juries to start the next term. And now in September, we're going to be piloting trial juries, and that's going to be challenging from a lot of perspectives. But I am extremely confident that by working together with the courts, the defense bar, the sheriff's office, my office, we can get this done.
Great work.
So, Tim, I'll ask you sort of the loaded question, and then we can peel back the onion from there. But, as a lawyer, I get a lot of this stuff, but business people and hardworking people, they're watching and they're hearing things like defund police and bail reform, right? And all these things. And the question is, how safe are we? That's really the thing. And I'll tell you, when this first started, pandemic first started, and we saw protests and riots, the ammo in the sporting goods stores were sold out, which showed that people were very scared, right? And we don't want people to be scared. So just sort of give me your overview of that so people on Long Island and Suffolk County here know we're safe.
Yeah, so the reality is, I mean, we have to look at data, right? And we can't undervalue people's emotions and the psychology of how we feel in our communities. And that's why it's very important to do an enormous amount of community outreach and certainly be as transparent as possible with people whom we're tasked to protect and to serve. But you have to look at the data. And the reality is in Suffolk County, in 2019, we saw historically low crime rates. And when I say historically low, what I mean is in or about 1975, Suffolk County began collecting reliable crime statistics. In 2019, those crime statistics were at a historic low dating back to 1975. In 2020, we're seeing another reduction. So we're seeing a 3.5% reduction off of those historic low numbers in 2019.
All right, let me just stop you right there. The why, right? Is it that people are all of a sudden having a moral epiphany, or is it because law enforcement is more impactful? Why is that?
I suspect, and this is sometimes hard to pinpoint causes and effects, of course, but we spend a lot of time thinking about this, studying this, analyzing data, and I suspect it's a multitude of factors. It's demographic changes, it's increased efficacy in law enforcement, and certainly Suffolk County, and we were talking a little bit about this in the beginning, Suffolk County is just such an unbelievable place. I grew up here, I've lived here most of my life, other than a brief pit stop in the city. I'm a Suffolk County guy, and it's just so diverse, right? We have communities that are almost like urban areas. We have sort of traditional suburban areas. We have country. We have wineries, farms, downtowns. We have the Long Island Railroad and the proximity to New York City. We have beaches, and we just have everything, right? We have communities that are comprised of families that settled there dating back to the 1600s, and we have communities that are mostly comprised of recent immigrants, particularly from Central America. We have an increasing Hispanic population in Suffolk County. We have the East End right now is exploding because of the pandemic. It's a very dynamic place, and so certainly we have certain demographic reasons that probably have resulted in the decrease in crime. But I think I would be remiss not to credit law enforcement to some degree. We've adopted an intelligence-led policing model, an intelligence-led prosecutorial model. And what that means is that we look at data and criminal intelligence, and we formulate our strategies and initiatives based on that data and intelligence to really address the public safety issues of our time. And this is such an interesting time for folks like me because there's such a big, larger than life discussion surrounding law enforcement. And what we've done in Suffolk County is we've just not involved the politics, right? We have a great lineup right now. We have a great sheriff. We have a great police commissioner. The DA's office is a professional prosecutor's office that is really becoming a national model in many respects.
We have a great DA. I'll say it. We have a great DA as well.
So we've been able to come to the table and talk about just business, right? No politics. So when you hear defund the police, that's a politically charged term. We've used this as an opportunity to, one, educate the public about the many reforms that we've been implementing over the years, but also listen to people and really listen to those who we're tasked to protect and to serve, and see how we can improve even more. And it really involves, sort of incremental reforms. Like, for example, body cameras have been a discussion that I piloted the first body camera program in the Suffolk County PD, and I'm a proponent of body cameras. I know there are logistical challenges, but I think overall they're a net positive. They're not a panacea, but they're a net positive. But then not just sort of one-shot policy initiatives that are good, but also real structural reform, increasing diversity, increasing our talent pool, and really thinking about how we're training our law enforcement officials and our officers and our prosecutors, using data to inform decisions, and having the tough conversations about how are we policing? How are we allocating police resources to our social issues? Police officers right now, pre-George Floyd and post-George Floyd, they have one of the toughest jobs in the world. We've expected, and when I say we, I mean the American public. It's not just Suffolk County. The American public has expected a police officer to be a warrior, a mentor, a social worker, a mental health professional, an EMT, basically, a drug counselor. And so we've put a lot on police officers. And I think nationally, I think it's fair to say that while we've put a lot on police officers, we haven't given them the tools and resources that they need to really get the job done. And so this is a good opportunity not to engage in hurtful rhetoric, whether it's pro-law enforcement, anti-law enforcement, Black Lives Matter, anti-Black Lives Matter. Instead of engaging in sort of political rhetoric, we're trying to get professionals and community groups and stakeholders to the table to have real conversations about policy.
Yeah, and I think, listen, that is the key, right? And that has to be the key. It's there's no doubt, I think, in any rational person's mind that we have to look at the dynamics of what's going on, particularly in the inner cities and how they interact with police departments, and deal with that. But when you hear such charged things like defund the police, and you see sustained riots, and you see police officers getting assaulted and abused, and then retiring and not wanting to be there, it's very difficult to reconcile that in somebody's brain who's not in the middle of that, right? It's very difficult to reconcile that. And so,
right.
How do we reconcile that?
So let's look at Suffolk County. So, we've had thousands, we've had hundreds of protests at this point involving thousands of people. So we're certainly, certainly not the hotbed of activism in terms of these, protests in public, but we've had our fair share. We've had a lot. And there's been only a handful of arrests and only a couple incidents that I would characterize as criminal. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, one, I think I give a lot of credit to the protesters who remained peaceful with only a few exceptions, and the police and how they've responded and how they're handling this, both in terms of doing community outreach and working with organizers prior to the protests, as well as how they actually police the protests. So, there certainly there may be some viewers who saw a protest that offended them. I certainly was offended by some of the things that were said during these protests, screaming and cursing at police officers. I find that to be disgusting. And frankly, I think those people should just be embarrassed about how they behave. But all in all, when you look at what's happening across the country, we've done a phenomenal job of creating a space where people can exercise their First Amendment right without letting people step over the line. So, I think in some jurisdictions, there has been too much of a hands-off policy in terms of policing protests. You want to make sure that people are allowed to demonstrate peacefully. But when someone commits a crime or doesn't obey a lawful police order, action needs to be taken. And it needs to be fair, and it needs to be swift, and it needs to be definitive. And so that's what I think the police have done an excellent job here doing. It's sort of that striking that right balance.
Yeah, it's been a big part of what I hear daily from business owners saying, so, okay, you can assault a police officer or throw a rock or burn something down and nothing happens. But if I have too many people in my business or somebody's not wearing a mask, I get a fine or I get my liquor license revoked. It's very hard to sort of manage that in a rational way. So I think you're right. Suffolk County, I think, has done an excellent job in terms of managing that, and is a national model. We have had a lot of protests, which I support. I support protests, and the Constitution gives us the right to do that, right? So we can peaceably protest. That's the key. That's the key. That's all right. What about bail reform? So bail reform is another, politically charged issue. How has it impacted you guys as prosecutors? How frustrating is that? Is it a good thing? What is your policy or thoughts about that?
So the initial bail legislation that was passed that became effective in January of 2020, I thought struck the wrong balance between ensuring that defendants weren't being held because of their lack of financial resources and public safety. I believe that at bottom and in its totality, the bail legislation that was passed in January jeopardized public safety for very simple reasons. This is again, this has nothing to do with politics, right? It has nothing to do with Republican, Democrat. This is about just law enforcement policy. Joe, does it make sense when someone's arrested over and over and over again, multiple times in a week. We're talking just constantly being arrested, not to give a judge the discretion to hold that person pending the criminal proceeding. I'm not saying it's mandatory, but shouldn't a judge have some discretion in dealing with a repeat offender like that? Well, one of the things the bail legislation did was that it ripped that discretion away from judges. The other thing it did was it just left out whole categories of crimes, including, by the way, when someone runs, when someone's a fugitive, to actually hold someone pending a criminal proceeding. And part of it was certainly policy driven. They wanted that. They wanted that objective. They wanted to have less people being held pre-trial, but some of it was just poor draftsmanship. And when I was advocating on behalf of law enforcement, and really not even law enforcement, on behalf of our community, one of the crimes that they didn't have included as a bail-eligible offense was murder conspiracy. So I was locking up a bunch of MS-13 gang members for murder conspiracy. It was a really great tactic. We had this long-term wiretap investigation that went on for 2 years. It's probably the largest wiretap investigation in American history that relates to gangs. Certainly, I can't speak to national security, but I've never heard of a wiretap investigation. We had 215 wiretaps going for 2 years. It's the largest one I've ever heard of, and we arrested hundreds of people worldwide, including 96 MS-13 gang members here in Suffolk County. We were hearing violence over that wiretap. We would hear someone was about to get killed, and we had to stop it. We had a moral obligation to stop it, but we wanted to protect the investigation. So we'd come up with creative ways to foil those murder plots. And we would have to charge conspiracy, right? Because they didn't actually kill someone, but we would be able to charge conspiracy in the second degree. That wasn't even a bail-eligible offense. So I called Albany, and I lobbied our local senators and assembly people, and we got that included in the original bail statute. But bottom line is, it didn't do a good job of striking the balance. It took too much discretion away from judges. However, we've been fighting for changes, and we got some changes in July. So they've now re-amended their bail statute. And it does give some discretion back to the judges with repeat offenders. It does give back discretion to judges when someone commits another crime while out on, while released on a pending case. And it does add a whole list of additional crimes, including child abuse crimes, terrorism-related crimes, a number of different crimes. It adds to the bail qualifying offenses. But
I was going to ask you on MS-13. First, kudos to you and your team for really bringing that, really doing some great work on that topic. How are we doing most recently with respect to the gangs in Suffolk County?
Yeah, so, as we talk about different public safety issues, I think you're going to hear some bad news and good news. On that front, I have to be frank, we're doing extremely well. We saw a significant uptick in MS-13 activity here in Suffolk County and the region, basically in late 2014, 2015. And we had a series of MS-13 related homicides. And some of the more high-profile ones, although they all should be high-profile, with the murder of the two girls in Brentwood, Lisa Mickens and Kayla Cuevas, two high school girls in Brentwood who were just savagely murdered on the streets in Brentwood. And we created a gang eradication strategy when I was police commissioner, and it was multi-pronged. It involved hotspot policing. It involved gang intelligence and targeting gang offenders for all different types of offenses. It involved working with our federal law enforcement partners to bring RICO charges. It involved working with the Department of Homeland Security. It involved working with community-based organizations. It was very broad and comprehensive. And we saw a dramatic decrease in violent crime and a dramatic decrease in gang activity. And then when I became DA, talking about, running businesses and recruiting talent, I basically operate a law firm, right? The People's Law Firm. And so when I came in, I was trying to grab talent from all over the state. I got the legislature to lift the residency requirement for certain positions. And I grabbed basically the best MS-13 prosecutor in the country, and I got her to work here. And she built this case that was just tremendous. And ultimately it was 215 wiretaps, and in the end, it was 330 arrests worldwide. I had Guatemalan law enforcement officials come up to thank us for our collaboration, because the intel that we were providing Guatemala helped them solve a number of MS-13 homicides. So I took them out to a local watering hole, and it was like, it was like we were diplomats. But it really was an awesome moment for the office and for the county. I mean, we're on the map. And so, 330 arrests worldwide, 96 defendants in Suffolk County, over leaders of over 9 cliques of MS-13 in Suffolk County were taken out. Over 10 murder plots were foiled. Just an enormous impact. I'll put it this way. The MS-13 leadership created a program called the New York program, not very creative. The idea was to develop a stronghold on Long Island. And the main objective of MS-13 is basically to exist, and for members to send money back to the leadership in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, mostly El Salvador. And so you develop a stronghold, right? The gang increases its return on its investment. Problem was, law enforcement was so effective in arresting these gang members and keeping young people out of the gangs to begin with, that the investment became so bad, they ended the New York program. We actually intercepted over the wiretap, and this is now obviously public because we're talking about in court proceedings. We intercepted over the wiretap the leadership's decision to terminate the New York program. I suppose if we were looser, we would have, popped a bottle of champagne. That was a great moment for us. But look, the MS-13 still exists in Suffolk County, and we have to stay vigilant. But we are in an entirely different universe than we were a few years ago.
Well done, sir, and well done to your team. I never realized that indeed you do run a law firm, in a sense, the People's Law Firm, as you said. Can you tell us how many lawyers, how many ADAs? Yeah. Sure.
We have 191, and then we have about 200 additional members of our team, divided. Most of those people are support staff, like paralegals, secretaries, analysts, auditors, folks who run the buildings and security. And then we have about approximately 40 investigators that work directly for the DA's office, for a total of about 400 employees. But then we have a number of task forces, both in our office, and then we also send folks to task forces throughout the region. So we have an East End Drug Task Force, which is made up of members of all the East End police departments, as well as the New York State Police and the Suffolk County Police Department. We have a heroin task force. We have folks from the sheriff's office. We have folks from the Suffolk County. We have a DA squad that is made up of Suffolk County police detectives. So in addition to the 400 employees, we have approximately another 100 of individuals who work with the office very closely in a task force model. So we're one of the largest offices in the country. We're top 20 in the country.
Yep. So Tim, before we went live, we were talking a little bit about kids, right? And so near and dear, I've been an active member of child abuse prevention services and other children advocacy groups, because nobody speaks for the kids, right? They're silent trauma. And you brought up a good point that I want you to sort of talk about a little bit, and that is, how the kids during this pandemic have sort of been overlooked as well, and the challenges we're having as a society to make sure they're being taken care of also. Because I think that's something I never thought about, and when you said it, it really, a light bulb went off, and I think it's important to talk about that so people know what to be looking for to try and help our kids, right?
Absolutely, and you said it best. We need to be the voice for our most vulnerable, and of course that includes our young people. So because of the pandemic, we've seen some crime decrease and some crime increase. And one of the increases is domestic violence. And I think it's self-evident, right? People are at home together. And if you had instability in your family, and you had alcohol and drug abuse and psychologiable issues and financial issues, and with the quarantine, with the shutdown, that all was worsened. And we saw an uptick in domestic violence. And that was very sad to see, and we're doing our best to address those issues. You also saw a decrease in child abuse allegations, and there is no question that's not because there's less child abuse going on. That's unfortunately because there's less reporting. Now, typically the way a child abuse allegation is reported is that the child goes somewhere, whether it's school, sports, a camp, church, a community group, whatever it is, a friend's house, a relative's house, and they report, or an adult notices something about that child and figures it out on their own. That's not happening right now. Certainly wasn't happening in March, April, June, July. Obviously we're opening up a bit now, which is good. But because people were basically quarantined, these children are able to be abused without the opportunity to report or for it to be discovered. And that is heartbreaking, knowing that we're seeing this significant reduction in child abuse claims. And this is nationwide. This is nationwide. This is not specific to any region, which is just terrifying, frankly. We're seeing a nationwide decrease in child abuse claims, and we know it's because of the reporting. And so we have to figure out creative ways to do outreach to these families and to get our foot in the door, frankly. Certainly I've proposed, folks who have had previous CPS cases, should we be, doing certain check-ins, even if they don't have an open case, right? It's one thing if you have an open case, then we do have that foot in the door. But just folks who have been on the radar in the past, is there a way that we can intervene and just, get eyes on a child? It's controversial, certainly, and it's difficult logistically, but we need to be, we need to be doing more.
Yeah, it always seems the kids are sort of slipping through the cracks, and I think we do need to do more as a society and as a whole. Peter, I know you had brought up earlier, maybe you want to talk a little bit about, the increased opioid and alcohol consumption that I'm sure, when a country decides that liquor stores are essential and churches are non-essential across the board, things are going to happen, right? Things are going to happen. So, yeah. Peter, I know you've been involved with your foundation on these issues.
Yeah, the Friedlander Foundation, where I'm privileged to serve as president, has worked alongside Tim and his group and a number of other agencies in Suffolk County to really stem the tide when it came to the opioid pandemic, quote unquote. I applaud you and your efforts there. Tell us, has it gotten any better? Well, I would say, I know it hasn't, but how bad is it with respect to the opioid use and abuse in this difficult pandemic period?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your partnership and all the work that your foundation does. Much of the improvements that we've made in terms of the opioid epidemic is due to community-based organizations like yours, and we can't do our job without that partnership, and it's absolutely critical. So as you know, because you're very familiar with this area, in 2018, so let me just take one step back. We've obviously been in a drug epidemic for over a decade. Really, Suffolk County probably entered the drug epidemic as early as 2007. It wasn't necessarily highlighted, but certainly that's when we saw numbers start to skyrocket. And we know the story, right? It started with pain pills, and that has a lot to do with the pharmaceutical industry and false advertising and reckless prescribing and just lack of awareness among folks of how dangerous these drugs were. And then that turned into a heroin epidemic as government started to act on the pill issue. That affected the supply of the pills. The demand was still there because people were addicted to opioids. So they needed to get their fix, and they migrated to heroin, which is even more potent than the typical oxycodone pill. And from there, we've gravitated into a fentanyl epidemic. Most of what we're seeing now isn't even heroin, it's fentanyl. And that's because it's even more potent, and drug dealers are extremely ruthless business people. They're extremely ruthless. They look at their product and they want to stretch it out as much as they can and make as much profit as possible. And they try to play it to the line where, how strong can I make this without killing my customer, but that, I get them completely hooked and coming back more and more, and how can I reduce my costs? So now we have a fentanyl epidemic and a fentanyl analog epidemic. Bottom line, because of everyone's hard work, whether it's treatment providers, prevention specialists, schools, law enforcement, foundations, everyone working hard. We started to see a decrease in 2018 and 2019 in drug-related overdose. And these are significant decreases, really moving the needle in a significant way. And unfortunately, our numbers are back up in 2020 year to date. And we link that directly to the pandemic. So, think about it, right? Folks who were on the road to recovery, they lose their job, they can't get to their NA meeting, they can't get to their support network, and they relapse. And you see the rate of overdoses with relapses are typically higher for a number of reasons, including the fact that they misjudged their tolerance because they were using a certain amount before they got clean, and they go back to that amount, but their tolerance goes way down and they end up killing themselves. But the other issue too is that the product is different. It changes so rapidly on the street that someone who was using it a couple of years ago, they're using a different product today. Now it's like I said, it's more fentanyl based, fentanyl analog based. So it's just more potent and more deadly. So you have that issue, and then you also have people who weren't, maybe they're people who are suffering from addiction for the first time because of all the economic despair, emotional turmoil, whatever the case may be, and now they're turning to drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism, and they become addicted. So we have a new class of sort of a new generation of folks suffering from substance use disorder. So that's.
I was going to say, you could have somebody who's on the road to recovery, whose parent or grandparent is their rock or their person that's getting them through this. And of course, they might get sick and be in a hospital and they wouldn't be able to see them, and or worse yet, pass away. And that person now has lost that all-important rock. But, it's a really good example of how the public-private partnership work together. I would say the philanthropic one, the triple P. And it really is a model for future efforts. And I applaud your team. Great work.
Yeah, so we have a multi-pronged strategy like most issues. We believe that we have to treat the demand side, right? This is not something you can arrest yourself out of. And the only way we can effectively do that, I think anywhere, but particularly in Suffolk County, is through partnerships with community-based organizations and foundations and treatment providers. And so we have so we view the criminal justice system as the continuum of opportunities for intervention. And what I mean by that, at each stage of the criminal justice system, we look at ways to intervene and get people suffering from addiction into treatment. So these, sometimes they're not even offenders. They're people who it's pre-arrest or people we come in contact with just by doing our jobs. But even in the system, post-arrest, pre-arraignment, post-arraignment, pre-plea, post-plea, post-sentence, at every stage, we try to figure out, can we get this person into treatment? So we've rolled out a number of different diversion programs to get these people into treatment. We've partnered with LICAD, Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependency, a number of different organizations to get this done. And it's been amazingly effective. So we rolled out a pre-arrest program where, when I was police commissioner, called Pivot, Preventing Incarceration via Opportunities for Treatment. And essentially, we would identify someone suffering from addiction based on a number of different intelligence data points. Maybe a person had an overdose. Maybe a person was repeatedly going to a pawn shop, whatever it is, right? And we identify those people and we refer them to LICAD. And LICAD essentially does a cold outreach to these folks. And I wasn't sure it was going to be successful, so we piloted it. And they've done outreach to well over 1,000 people. And over 20% of the people who've received outreach from LICAD have accepted treatment as a direct result of the outreach. And that is incredible. Anyone who knows addiction, that number is off the charts. These are people, and then I've had people come up to me in the community and say, you saved my life. Now, it's not me, it's the team that we put, but I'm the face of it. So they see me and they said, I was at rock bottom and I got a call and I grabbed that hand because I needed it. And I'm alive today because I got that call. I mean, that's incredible work being done by LICAD and other treatment providers and peer recovery coaches, civic groups throughout Suffolk County. But we also believe in Suffolk County that we have to aggressively target drug dealers. We believe it makes a difference. We think it saves lives. particularly when you're dealing with very lethal substances. So we've rolled out a number of different initiatives focused on targeting drug dealers who are causing overdoses, as well as we've created a new bureau called the Special Narcotics Bureau, and they basically specialize in wiretap investigations to take out large-scale drug trafficking organizations.
Hey, Tim, one of the most evil uses I think that drug dealers use for their product is to have young girls be addicted to it and then put them into sex trafficking. And I know that's something that you have been aggressively focused on. I'm sure MS-13 being part of Suffolk County has helped make that happen. But what's going on there, and how are we fighting back against that? Because that is a triple tragedy in my mind, right?
Absolutely, Joe. And this is an area where we need to double down. We need to do more. I know it's probably gonna sound a little strange to a lot of folks listening, but we have a major human trafficking problem in Suffolk County, period. And it is directly linked to the drug epidemic. And it's exactly what you just said. Essentially what happens, and this is really sick and twisted, but a criminal starts to think, how can I make more money? I'm selling drugs. When I sell drugs, the drugs disappear. I gotta go re-up. I gotta buy more drugs. With a girl or a woman or a person, they can keep selling that commodity, and that's how they think. So it's very disgusting. It's very depraved, and the way they often keep these people employed, keep them in their grips, is through drugs. So they'll either prey on someone with a drug addiction, and they'll provide them drugs basically in exchange for their sexual slavery, or they'll get people hooked on drugs, and they use those drugs to keep people controlled, and they also use those drugs to keep people with them. And so we rolled out a very progressive and aggressive human trafficking strategy that really shifts the paradigm, where we're treating victims as true victims. We've partnered with not-for-profit organizations to get these girls and women, because they're mostly girls and young women, services that they need to help them break that vicious cycle of violence. We've also invested in training to train our police officers how to spot human trafficking. We've done a number of outreach programs to train the community about how to spot human trafficking. And then we've created specialized units in my office and the Suffolk County Police Department to exclusively specialize in human trafficking. That's the Human Trafficking Unit in the PD. And we work with them, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, to basically bring sustainable cases against these human trafficking organizations. And it's something that we need to stay vigilant on. And our best line of defense is the public. We need to educate the public about what it looks like, what human trafficking looks like, and public needs to be our eyes and ears. I'll tell you a quick story, sort of a good return on the investment. So like I said, part of it was training police officers about what it looks like. And one of our biggest human trafficking cases in the last couple of years was born out of a traffic stop. Police officer pulled over a car, and he noticed a man and a young woman, and he realized immediately something was off. There was a big age disparity. They weren't related. She looked disheveled. A number of different reasons made him believe that perhaps she was a victim of human trafficking, and this was the result of the training that he received. And that case ended up uncovering one of the most grotesque human trafficking rings we've prosecuted here in Suffolk County.
Yep, good old-fashioned police work seems to always and I'll tell you, not all criminals are evil, but people that are using drugs to addict young women into sex trafficking are purely evil people. There's just no way around that.
Yeah, we had a case where a defendant was keeping women locked in his parents' basement, forcing them to relieve themselves, go to the bathroom in a bucket, and just disgusting behavior.
Yep. And Joe said there's good old-fashioned police work, but there's also newfangled police work too. Where are you on the use of the video cameras? Are they in different towns? Are they being used? Because I think that's a great way to spot, first evidentiary, and then of course any kind of issues that are happening. Yeah,
so we've made significant investments in technology over the last several years, whether it's surveillance, video surveillance, overt and covert. right? Sometimes we want people to see the cameras on the streets because it prevents and deters crime. Sometimes we're doing investigations and we don't want people to see it. So we've invested in some really effective tools to capture video, and other technology like license plate readers, wiretap infrastructure, our ability to intercept cell phones, particularly when criminals are using encrypted apps. We're a national leader on this front right now. One of the biggest issues facing law enforcement is technology. The fact that the telecommunication companies can develop and implement technology much quicker than law enforcement. So you have all these companies, whether it's Google, Apple, whatever it is, and the subsidiaries, creating all these encrypted applications, and law enforcement has no way to decode it. Suffolk County, we're a leader on this, and we're piloting a program with the FBI that is cutting edge in terms of decrypting and collecting data from cell phones. We just invested in a whole new infrastructure to deal with all the data that's on these cell phones. We made a multi-$100,000 investment in servers. We're doing so much in terms of wiretap and electronic surveillance that I have a room somewhere just filled with servers. I have my own servers, an air-conditioned room with servers. I mean, we're really trying to be a national model. Technology is a big piece of that, and not just on the crime fighting side, but also office management. My goal is when I leave DA that this office is entirely paperless, and we really moved the needle on that.
So Tim, talk a little bit about what it was like coming into the DA's office on the heels of the scandal, and what challenges a department faces. And I know a lot of the guys working for you. You got a great team. You got great guys, really, guys and gals, really leading the charge. But what are those challenges, and how were you able to manage through that so effectively, right? Because it seemed very seamless that you were able to do it.
Yeah, and it really, in some ways it was, and in some ways it wasn't. So we worked very hard during the transition. I interviewed every single person in this office before I took office. Same approach I took when I was police commissioner. I came in in both organizations, but particularly the police department, as a complete outsider, an unconventional choice. As PC, I'd never served as a police officer. I was younger than previous police commissioners by decades. And I didn't work in the Suffolk County criminal justice system. I got my start as a federal prosecutor in Manhattan, in the Southern District of New York. So I needed to not only learn the department and every aspect of it, but I also needed to engender trust in the people whom I was serving in and outside the department. So that's a big piece of it, bringing people together for everyone to be part of the solutions, getting, really listening to people's feedback. You see the DA's office prior to me, you read the headlines, and you come away thinking that the whole organization must be just rotten to the core, right? And, that's obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but that wasn't the truth. This office has been mismanaged for decades. And there was also a number of individuals who were criminally corrupt that politicized this office and destroyed lives with the power of the DA's office. But there are also great men and women who are working here and doing God's work. And I know that sounds weird, but that's just the case. So the question was, what's working? What isn't working? What are the structural reforms? What do we need to do now, as opposed to what are our 3-month goals? What are our 1-year goal? What's the 4-year goal? And really setting out a vision. So we created a mission statement. It's a very basic mission statement, but it's to make the office a national model, to seek justice in each and every case, and to make Suffolk County as safe as possible to live, work, and raise a family. And then there's a number of things that go into that. Talent is one of the biggest things, as you know. Recruiting talent, retaining talent, having a diverse organization, an extremely talented, hardworking organization. Training, we overhauled our training program completely. We're doing more quality training than ever before, and not just here in Suffolk, but nationwide. using technology. We have a whole new case management system. Everything is digital right now, which is just awesome. It's awesome from a management perspective, and it's great for the ADAs. They provide discovery to Defense Council now through a cloud-based program, through an electronic discovery program. And we're able to then do real data analytics, which is sort of my next frontier. How can we use sophisticated data analytics to better manage the office? And now that we have our data stored digitally, that's the hard part, right? It's one thing if you're counting beans and paper, you can't analyze data. But if you have everything in a system, then you could get a more sophisticated data analytics program to lay over that and really run some interesting reports to make our office more effective. Making sure that the bureaus are lined up. When the previous administration, they had a personnel problem. Instead of dealing with the personnel problem, they just split the bureaus up and just created 2 bureaus so that they didn't have to make any hard decisions. So aligning resources and making sure we were properly positioned to address all the public safety issues of our time. So I got rid of bureaus, I added bureaus, and setting the priorities. The priority is justice in each and every case, but obviously we need to allocate resources in particular areas. So we set priorities. We were very frank about it. The drug epidemic was our top priority. Gang violence, human trafficking, environmental crime, public integrity, and conviction integrity, which is looking at wrongful convictions, claims of wrongful convictions. So, I think just by putting together an effective team, a diverse team, trying to get that clear message out, the clear mission as to what we're trying to do here, and bringing everyone to the table. Obviously, we had to get rid of a lot of people, and we did. But we also kept more people than we got rid of, and we really brought those folks in to be part of the solution. I think it's like one of my favorite books is Team of Rivals. About how Abraham Lincoln created teams.
Yeah, Doris Kearns Goodwin, good book.
Yeah, and that's what we try to do here, and really try to we just rolled out a bunch of working groups to in light of George Floyd to work on a bunch of different issues, and the idea is team of rivals. Let's get some really smart people, well-intentioned people in the room with a lot of different perspectives, and see if we can come out with a mission statement, a work product, and an implementation plan. But it wasn't. So that sounds all great, but it wasn't all smooth. One of the things as a leader, you come into an agency where my predecessor was literally indicted, right? I thought I'd come in and I thought there'd be trumpets playing, okay, here comes our savior. No. They have no idea, where you're coming from. They're nervous. They're anxious. And frankly, a lot of these people liked Spoda, right? Because he was the guy who hired them. He was the guy who promoted them. And, he's someone who's clearly a good old boy, right? So a lot of people knew him very well. No one knows me. So it was challenging, so I try to walk the halls, try to talk to people. I try to just manage effectively, and hopefully through our actions, people buy into the new culture.
Yeah, so people don't realize, at least in the business community, they probably don't realize the enormous responsibility that you have as the top prosecutor here in the county. Ultimately, you and your people through you decide who is going to be prosecuted and who isn't going to be prosecuted, right? Good police will find people that they have probable cause to make an arrest, but you guys have to decide, yeah, this is something that warrants a prosecution or not. So how do you manage that, and how do you set that policy to make sure that it really is equal across the board?
Yeah, so starting with just clear policy, and then backing, making sure ADAs know what's expected of them, and then training them to get the job done, and providing proper supervision. So those are some of the basic building blocks. So, our job is twofold in some ways. Many of our ADAs, they take cases that are incoming. So police make an arrest, and it comes in that day. Now it comes in right away. We have a new protocol that requires the police departments to contact us immediately, and we work with them at the time of arrest to draft the accusatory instruments, to start collecting this discovery, and to address any legal issues, which, is a best practice nationwide for some time, and this office just wasn't doing it. So we rolled out that best practice in January, and it's working just phenomenally. We're seeing better results. At first, the police departments were, no way, we're not doing this. But we got buy-in, and I think now everyone agrees it's just such a net positive for everyone, our office, the police departments, and the people. Basically, a lot of our caseload is incoming. So first time we're learning about it is when someone's in handcuffs. And so we have to make an evaluation as to how to proceed. Policy is to, charge the most serious crime that we're confident we can, certainly that we have probable cause for, but also that is provable at a trial. It doesn't mean we need all the evidence at the time of arrest. That's never going to be the case. But that there is, in theory, we have the ability to prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt. And we proceed from there. And we obviously, most of our cases are disposed of through guilty pleas, which is the case in all criminal justice systems throughout the country. And we have policies relating to how we go about negotiating a proper disposition, the criminal defendant's background, age, the nature of the crime, how the victims feel about the disposition, or if it's dealing with a fatality, how the loved ones feel. All sorts of factors go into it, and it's difficult. But certainly, the goal is justice for the victims, justice for the community, and justice for the defendant, whatever that may be. We're not the one thing I would say. I just make 2 points. One, sort of more of a philosophical point. We're not a political office, and Spoda was political in that he used the office for his own political ends, right? But now put that aside, because that's criminal. You're seeing more and more DA's offices that are political, and that their DAs stand for a progressive policy or a law and order policy. We reject that. I think it's extremely dangerous to the criminal justice system. We essentially try to call balls and strikes, and our goal is to do justice. And that looks like different things in different cases, right? It's going to depend on the unique facts and circumstances of each case. So one of the things that we emphasize with our ADAs is we don't have a philosophy. Our philosophy is justice and doing the right thing. And that's going to depend on proper investigation, proper legal research, and applying the facts to the law. And that's it. It's hard to do, but it's simple in concept. The other issue I would emphasize is that the next frontier, as I mentioned, is data analytics. And we really want to try to be able to run reports to see if there's any disproportionate impacts on certain defendants. So are white defendants being treated more favorably than defendants of color? Are defendants who have private counsel as opposed to appointed counsel or legal aid, are they being treated any differently? And, we can sort of look at our data, but it'd be very helpful if we had a more sophisticated way of analyzing that. And so we're partnering with a number of different organizations. I may even do an RFP to get that done.
Yeah, it's very, very complicated, as you say, because you're dealing with human beings and human elements. But
there's some variables too, right? It could be you could see something that looks bad, right? That defendants of color are being more harshly sentenced, but is it because of criminal history, right? Is it because of another factor? And it's hard to control for so many different variables. And then, a lot of people say, well, criminal history, is that even fair? Because we know that there's been racism in law enforcement, including in Suffolk County, and a white person may have a lighter rap sheet, but it's only because, maybe communities of color were over-policed and you're just more likely to catch a rap in those communities. So it's very complex, and it's not going to be something that you have a perfect picture of, but I do think we can get a better idea of how we're doing through technology and in data analytics.
Yep. So last question, and then we're going to have to break. But what do you spend your time doing mostly, right? What is a day in the life of a district attorney look like? Is it hands-on, trying to train the staff? Is it more community relations? What is it that Tim Sini spends his time doing?
Yeah, it's something I evaluate constantly because I'm trying to, I want to be as effective and efficient as possible. So most of my time is undoubtedly spent on management of the office, recruiting talent, retaining talent, designing training programs, not delivering. People deliver the training programs in my office, but helping design training programs, setting the priorities of the office, launching new initiatives to make Suffolk County safer. Dealing with our budget and the complicated fiscal crisis we're in, and just sort of the management, sort of running a law firm and a law enforcement agency. That's most of my time.
And I know how much that sucks, Tim, believe me. Believe me, I know firsthand.
I don't know if you, yeah, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to bring you over. This is how sort of OCD I am. Those are all my people on a board, and sort of aligning people, putting them in the best position where they can reach their full potential, and just managing the day-to-day. And then I'd say the second bucket that takes up most of my time is case management. So we do thousands of cases a year. I mean, I'm talking over 20,000 criminal cases, over 40,000 cases if you consider the traffic stuff that we have to do on the East End and in certain villages. So the vast majority of cases don't come to my desk, right? But there is a significant portion where I'm making decisions on whether they're long-term investigations or they're cases that, homicide cases or cases that are thorny for whatever particular reason. We have all these disclosure issues that we have to work through with police officers. So that would be the second focus, is sort of case management. Yep. And then the last piece I would say is community relations and being the face of the office, and doing things like this and going out into the community and listening to people, which is definitely an important part of the job. So that's basically where we're at. Fortunately, although I'm an elected official, my own politics doesn't take up a lot of time. Our political strategy is very simple. We do a good job, and we hope that the results will speak for themselves in an election year.
Sure, they will.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So we're going to wrap up. Peter, give us some positive final thoughts from an economic perspective, please.
Well, this market keeps going higher, and that has provided certainly a wealth effect, as the Fed and Treasury would tell you. The wealth effect, people's assets are higher. But just interestingly, though, we're seeing the opposite occur. Folks are saving more, spending less. The opposite of what you would see in a whippy, frothy, even, overly frothy market. So I think the positive takeaway, Joe, is that people are saving, people are strengthening their financial statements. I think that's a positive going forward.
Great stuff. District Attorney Tim Sini, final thoughts.
I want to thank Joe and Peter and everyone on your team for inviting me. This has been a terrific discussion. And I guess I would just say, one of the messages I've been trying to get out, there's a lot of stress right now on folks in large part because of the pandemic and a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. The one thing you don't have to worry about in Suffolk County is your public safety. We have your backs, and we're not going to miss a beat no matter what the pandemic throws at us. And you have enough to worry about. We all have enough to worry about with our personal and financial lives. We'll keep you safe.
Yep, and I'm super, super proud to hear from you during this time and hear how great the work is going on there. One thing I am certain of is you guys have our backs, and that for the business community, that brings us so much comfort right now. You can't even imagine. It's one less thing that we have to worry about than some of these other cities and municipalities are worried about right now. We want to thank District Attorney Tim Sini. Folks, next week, Dr. Bruce Stillman, CEO of Cold Spring Harbor National Labs, going to be talking about progress on a vaccine. We're super excited about that. I think that's important to our recovery. Mr. District Attorney, on behalf of everyone, thanks for your time. Keep up the good work. And we appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone. Thanks for your